Down, down, down. We are live. Rick, welcome back. You really
Ooh.
took a long vacation there. I didn't think we were coming back again.
I
Oh,
was
wait, no,
beginning
my
to
fault.
wonder
Never mind.
myself. Uh,
I apologize to everybody. I got a art job working on a project for the Temple Institute on Megillat Esther, and we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to put off the return to our Genesis study for 1 week because I'd like to share out what I've been working on this project. The Megillah Esther refers to the book of Esther, and every year at Purim, it's one of our Jewish holidays, we read the Megillah. We read the book of Esther. And this year I had the honor of working with the Temple Institute and producing the artwork for their Megillah. And if you'd like to get your own copy, it's for free. You can go to my website, newherocomics.com, and at the very top, there's a little yellow area that has a download button. You click it there. That will take you to the Temple Institute website, which is templeinstitute.org/Purim/. I've actually brought up here, and I'm going to share. Let's see here.
to share this out a few places.
There we go. Okay, so you can see right here, this is actually a PDF document that you can download for free. And this is my first image for the site. This refers to the Mishteh, or the feast that's happening at the beginning of the book of Esther. The book of Esther is written during the Medo-Persian captivity. It was after the Babylon fell and the Medo-Persians took over. And we have Ahasuerus, or Artaxerxes, or Xerxes, depending on how you want to call him. If you watch the 300, he has rippling muscles and like a giant. But here, I got the king. He's a bit of a fatty. He likes to have fun. And what they're eating, if you'll notice, all these vessels they're eating out of are actually vessels from the temple. And if you go to the templeinstitute.org, they actually have all these images, all these vessels. They've actually remade them in real life, so you can actually see them if you go to the site, or if you're in Israel and you go to Jerusalem, to the old city, you can stop in at the Temple Institute and see some of these things for yourself. These vessels are all being made with the intention of being used in the third temple. So what happened, as sort of an overview, is that they're having a huge festive dinner. And what they're rejoicing is that it would appear to them that the prophecy the Jews received about returning back to their land after 70 years has not happened. And they're celebrating, and it's sort of the greatest slap that they could manage. They are using the temple vessels themselves to show that sort of like they're celebrating that the Jews are not returning back to their land. And that,
this would be from the book of Daniel, right? If I remember right, when the writing's put on. Well, isn't there a point when the one king uses the temple vessels to eat and drink, and then there's like writing put on the wall?
There is that section in Daniel, and Daniel, actually, one of the big things that he does is he prays to the angel, or he prays to Hashem, and an angel provides him the insight. He wonders what's going on, because in his time, and Daniel's a contemporary of Mordecai and Esther, by the way. The Jews have not been redeemed yet, and according to his the way he understood time, they should have been regathered back to the land of Israel. And so the angel came and explained to him how that when they were going to be redeemed, and how they misunderstood the starting of the prophecy. But here we have also with the feast, here. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the army of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty, many days, 180 days. So this feast doesn't go into detail of exactly that these are necessarily from the temple, but he talks about, and they gave them drink in vessels of gold, vessels in verse 1 form from another, royal wine in abundance according to the bounty of the king. Here it really just describes the feast, but we know from Jewish tradition that they were used, the vessels they refer to are actually the vessels from the second temple, or from the first temple, from the temple of David or Solomon, depending how you want to phrase it. So they had this great feast, and the book of Esther is one of the most interesting books in the Tanakh. And that's because, I think most people are familiar with the idea that God's name never appears in the book of Esther. I don't think that would surprise anybody. It's a very unusual feature.
Well, when I did find out about, 20 years ago, it did surprise me. So I'm sure there's some people that might not know it yet.
Right. Well, it is. Well, whenever you find out for the first time, it is surprising. But I found that most people are aware of this point now.
Yeah, and so at that point, usually somebody, and I'm not sure whether I did or not, you go back and you try and look, it's like, what the? They're right. It isn't there.
Right. That's right. You go through and you're looking, well, there's no mention of God here. But it's interesting because really this whole book is in part a play on describing how we live our lives. We live our lives, and we don't see God. We may not even talk to God directly, but it can't be helped but to be noticed that God is ever present in our lives, and that is what the book of Esther is talking about. I think a lot is it's telling us that even though you may not see God, you may not think you see God, that He's there and He's behind the scenes and He's controlling things and He's involved. And that's really one of the most exciting things, because this makes us realize that even in a world where God isn't as apparent as it was in earlier generations, He's still there and He's still present. So but the book of Esther has lots of interesting parallels going throughout it. You have the three main characters overall, which is Xerxes, four, I guess you could say. Xerxes, Haman, Esther, and Mordecai.
Mordecai?
Mm-hmm. And Mordecai is her uncle, if you'll remember.
Yeah.
We know from the Talmud that after the Jews return from the captivity to Israel, Mordecai and Daniel make it back as well, and they actually sit on the Sanhedrin. They're part of what's called the Men of the Great Assembly, and they're the ones who help to create the order of the prayer book and a lot of different things.
I forget their Jewish names, but there's three real famous guys in the Bible. The middle guy's name is Meshach.
Right.
There's a group called the Apologetics. They do a parody of those three to Love Shack, and they call it Meshach.
Oh, that's funny.
It's a real good song. I should maybe play it for you afterwards. They do actually a lot of Old Testament type stuff. Obviously because they cover old and new.
Right.
But some of their old stuff points towards the new. But I'm sure you could overlook that, especially if they're good tunes. They take they're a parody band. They take a lot of mainstream songs, and I'd say put them Christian, but put them put the Bible to them.
Well, we have a lot of parody songs like that here as well with a lot of Jewish bands. We have a group called the Maccabees and 613, and those two love to do parodies of popular songs. And uh, if you ever want to check out those guys are a lot of fun.
Do they do them in English?
Most of those they're either English or English Hebrew or English Yiddish, depending on which one it is. But it's mostly English. Yeah, they're mostly English.
Just so I can understand it. I'm sure they sound great in Hebrew.
You'll be
but
able
if I can't understand it,
right? No, these guys are living like America, so they're going to do like English.
Oh, they have a lot I did not know that.
Yeah,
you have to give me a DM me about them afterwards.
Oh, sure, I'd love to. I also have a couple of playlists I've created. One is some of my favorite Jewish music, and it's got a lot of English songs. Then I have my drawing music, which is a collection. It's becoming largely more and more like Israeli music, and but some good songs, a lot of good music anyway. Although even if you're not able to understand the words, I think the melodies you'll really enjoy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you have these four main characters: Vashti, Mordecai, Haman, and Esther. And Vashti really just takes up a very brief moment. It's really Xerxes, Haman, Mordecai, and Esther who are taking up the vast majority of the book. According to the Jewish tradition, Vashti was the last one of the last princesses of Nebuchadnezzar, and there is stories. Some say that Xerxes worked his way up from a stable boy and made his own fortune and took over the government. There's some that say that he actually discovered a portion of Nebuchadnezzar's wealth, and he took that for himself, and he bought himself the kingdom. So we have some different stories on Artaxerxes and where he comes from and who he is. He's an interesting person in the book because you're never really entirely sure how to take him. I know that sometimes people look at him as sort of like this good-natured fool, that he was basically a nice guy, but Haman misled him or something like that. And I don't think you get to his state of power by being a good-natured fool. I think that this is sort of selling him short on what he's capable of.
Good-natured fool might be an overstep, like you said, but I think of even with the connection of Daniel. Look at the guys that convinced him to let nobody worship you. Nobody can worship anybody else but you for the next 30 days. They got him to sign that order just to get Daniel, and this guy's supposed to really love Daniel, yet he doesn't know Daniel prays 3 times a day to his own God, no matter what.
Right. Well,
yeah. It's a similar situation, I would say.
There's being self-absorbed, and obviously, like, why would the king bother learning about all these different religions in his kingdom? Back with in eras when the pagans were in charge of the world, there were lots of different religions. There was really no point in learning all of them.
That I get. I guess it's just more I'm thinking, like, okay, or at least for the Daniel, this guy's supposed to really love Daniel, yet he doesn't, or at least that's part of the story I've been told, right? I know I've read it,
Sure.
Yet he doesn't know this thing about some guy that he's supposed to be, best buds about.
Sometimes it depends on how it's put to them, right?
Yeah.
Like even when Haman talks to Ahasuerus, he clouds the identity of the Jewish people that he's talking about. Did you know that there is a nation who does not obey your laws? They have their own law. Well, that sounds rebellious. Even though that what they were really talking about was the Jews obeying the religious law, because they didn't have a country at this point. So the laws having to do with the government weren't applicable. They weren't observed, and it was mostly like it is today, where Jews observe like more like the religious laws.
They got caught by being told half truths.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it, and also, I think look. I don't want to give him too much credit either. I think that Xerxes also, a party animal, and he likes to, he wants to maximize his power. But
yeah.
What I don't like it, like for example, the movie Night with the King. I really dislike that movie. Maybe that's One Night with the King. I really dislike that movie because they turned it into a love story between Esther and Xerxes, and it was not a love story. She was taken against her will to the king, and the king had killed his previous wife, for very little cause. He'd gotten drunk, and he just said, she's giving me a little attitude, I'm going to kill her. And
well, didn't he just exile her?
No, he killed her.
I thought he exiled her. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody different.
I guess it depends on how you understand the text. I think there's a way you could read it that maybe you could get the idea that she was exiled, but generally we understand that she was actually killed.
And then there was like a nationwide or nations-wide beauty pageant for the next.
That's right, from all over the entire kingdom of Artaxerxes, and it took over a period of about a year I think altogether, and
to nail it down to one.
Well, in part because one of the things they wanted to do was make sure none of these women were pregnant. You didn't want to get a new queen on the throne who was pregnant, and then you have an heir who wasn't from the issue of the king. So part of it was preparation to be judged, and part of it was also to weed out because they took women as long as they were good looking, they didn't care. And this is why I want to say
whether they were married or not already.
They were married or not. You're right. And that's why I want to say I don't think we should paint Artaxerxes as kind of harmless fool or harmless in any way. This guy was a conqueror. He killed people, and he was, he wanted a wife, and he didn't really care if they were previously married or not. He just wanted a beautiful woman.
Almost like any other guy, but.
Well, yeah, but sometimes, but the funny thing is that I keep talking about these parallels. We haven't seen them any, but this is actually one of the things with Abraham, where they say, why didn't you tell me that Sarah was? Why did you say Sarah was your sister? He says, because I thought the people here would kill me for her. If I said that she was my wife, they would kill me because of it, and because I don't think that you really fear God. That was my worry because he had witnessed their behavior, and so this carries on with Xerxes, and this is nothing new to monarchies, where they'll take whoever they want. So
unfortunately, sort of like what David almost did, with Bathsheba.
Oh, David, David. Okay, yeah. Well, that's an interesting story, and when we get to that section in Samuel,
I know it's a little different, but it's got similarities. I'm just saying.
Right. Well,
with the king killing, thing, he tried to do it, nicely. He just didn't do it outright, like just go chop off the guy's hand himself and say, "I'm taking your wife."
Well, there's actually a lot more going on with that story, and when we get to that, I'll share it with you, because it is one of those things. The funny thing about us is that there are people who in the Torah or the Tanakh are highly criticized, and then we'll have like traditions that say, well, it's not the situation you think it is, and then there are people who are not criticized at all, and we'll have information. We'll say, yeah, this guy was up to no good, and it's probably we've never been shy about calling out people who have been sinners. Yeah. But I just want to point out that if David is a man after God's own heart, then stealing a man's wife and killing him for her is not something that would appeal to God. But that's something. That's a story I want to say when we get to that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say he stole her initially. He just got, he's somewhere where he shouldn't have been. He got tempted. Things happened that he wasn't expecting. and he tried to correct the situation his way, and which wasn't the best way to do it.
Well, since you're insisting on this little rabbit trail, here we go. All right.
Okay.
You won't let it alone. You won't let me step away from it. I want to leave it later, but you won't let it go. So okay, let's go. Let's get into this.
Okay.
Every man in Jewish law, if a man goes missing, right?
Yeah.
And we never find his body, his wife is never able to marry again.
Yeah.
Because because it could be he'll turn up one day, and then if she gets married to a new person, has children with her. Now you've created mamzer. A mamzer is a person who is not allowed to marry within the
Jewish faith.
The Jewish people. They can only marry other mamzerim, right? I think you call it in English like a bastard, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to do with out of wedlock. It has to do with the fact that the person, the child,
this person could have been born with what you're describing. The woman gets remarried. She has a kid with her new husband, and then Joe Blow, her first husband, pops up. He wasn't really dead.
And now she's committed a terrible sin.
But he wasn't.
So now she's committed a terrible sin. So it was the custom for the Jewish army that when they would go out to war, they would write bills of divorce for their wives. So in case they went missing, their wives wouldn't be stuck in this aguna status, the status of not knowing if their husband was alive or not, and not being able to remarry. So when Bathsheba's husband went out to war, he'd actually given a writ of divorce for her. So she was not married at this time. So when she and David had their relationship, she was not doing so as a married woman. So he was not committing adultery according to this. He was doing something he shouldn't have done. And the problem that ultimately what the problem was how does this look to my troops? My troops are on the front line fighting these battles, and what, the king is at home hooking up with their wives? Is that what's going on? So what he did is very much looked down upon. He committed a sin, but not the sin that most people think that he committed. He didn't commit adultery. The other thing was with the Hittite who was her husband. The reason he got sent to the front line was not to cover up his relationship with Bathsheba, but because he defied the king. If you'll remember, now I'm not saying that there weren't benefits from doing that. I'm not saying that it wasn't kind of like, this is convenient. But I am saying that the primary cause and the justification for it was when David said, "Go sleep with your men, right?" And he refused. He was refusing the order of the king. And refusing the order of the king is a traitorous act, and you can be put to death for that. So being sent to the front of the line was not murder to cover up a sin. He shouldn't have done either of the two things he did. But they are sins not on the same level as what most people think they are.
But when, who was it? Solomon? No, Samuel? Was it Samuel? Mm-hmm. The prophet came to him, didn't he?
Nathan the prophet.
Didn't he more describe it the way that we tend to think of it as?
He described it as
I forget the prophet's name, but Nathan.
It was Nathan. Prophet Nathan. Uh-huh.
There's so many prophets. Especially, Nathan's a big one, but a small one at the same time,
Well, I believe Samuel's dead at this point already.
Yeah.
He is dead. Samuel the prophet is dead already, because remember, he dies before Shaul, the King Saul dies. But David the prophet comes to King David. He tells him, I guess, a parable, and he says, here's a situation. There's a rich man who has a lot of flocks, lots of livestock, and the poor man, he only has like one little lamb. And the rich man takes the poor man's lamb to use for offering or for whatever reason, what should happen to him? And King David says, "Oh, he should die." And he goes, "That man is you." Okay, so in this parable, what is being discussed? The lambs and the poor man, the rich man, referring to the rich man as King David, who's a king, and the lambs are multiple wives. He has several different wives. The other person is the Hittite, and he has the one lamb. He has Bathsheba,
the one wife,
and he took her from him and used them for whatever the purpose was. But this is not a story of this is not a parable saying you have committed adultery, because if it had been, then he should David's punishment should have been death. And part of the reason we can understand some of this better is,
well, David even says the punishment should be death himself. There.
Right, but he's having an emotional reaction. Sometimes we say that person should die, not because we actually literally believe he should die, but because we're so offended at what he did.
True.
So I don't think that he was literally saying he should die, because in that scenario you're dealing with theft then, and theft carries with a punishment of restitution of an extra 20%. So him saying this is requires death is a complete exaggeration.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more because the rich man has so much, and then the small fry only has has practically nothing, and the rich man steals from the poor man.
Right.
God says not to oppress the poor.
But the Hittite is not poor. I mean, he's but it's just in comparison to David, he is.
Yeah.
So I just want to put that out there, and we can study this more in depth when we get to it. And that is
well, this is a nice big rabbit trail.
It is. Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome.
Gordon, you weren't doing your job anymore. Like, Rick never does rabbit trails for him anymore.
Well, maybe we should try and get back onto Esther.
Okay. So with all the different parallels, I don't know if you know this. Maybe I think I've talked to you about this before, but maybe I haven't. Since we're talking about Samuel, there was a very significant event that happened while Samuel was a judge and a prophet over Israel, and that was when King Saul fought Agag, the king of Amalek, and killed everyone but saved King Agag alive.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You remember the story?
Yeah. Samuel
comes in, and he is just absolutely angry with King Saul and says, weren't you given the instructions to get rid of all the stuff? You're not allowed to keep any of the wealth. And Saul said, I did get rid of everything, but I only kept the choicest of the lambs, because he said, what is the bleating of sheep? Because I only kept the choicest to make an offering to God. And he said, this is not what God instructed. Okay. Going forward to the time of Esther, Haman is called Haman the Agagite. He is a direct descendant of King Agag the Amalekite. That period of time when he was saved alive by King Saul, I'm trying to say English and Hebrew at the same time. King Saul.
He was saved by King Saul when he was supposed to be killed. Thus, he wouldn't have had an ancestor to, be a pain in Mordecai's side and the Jewish people's side.
So he had time to procreate, to have a descendant,
other kids.
And so this is so Haman is the result of that.
Yeah.
And Haman becomes the threat of the Jewish people he wants to do to the Jewish people what they did to the Amalekites, which they're commanded the Torah to do. The Torah were commanded to wipe out the memory of Amalek, right?
Yeah.
And
that's what Amalekites. I forget that.
Amalekites. Amalekites.
Something like that. These names are so hard to pronounce. Why can't you guys have come up with better, easier names to pronounce?
They're very easy if you speak Hebrew.
Well, most of the world doesn't.
It's your fault for being an English speaker, Rick. It's not my fault. So, well,
that's the worst part about reading my Bible, my Old Testament. Hooka mookie wiki waka wooka. Begat none of the motor we do water.
You know what, Rick? I'm not going to take your charge too seriously, because I happen to know that you read a lot of comic books. And they have a lot of weird names in those, and that you have no trouble remembering those names.
Yes, I do.
Boom, on you.
Give me one weird name in comic books that I might not remember. Or I might remember.
What's the name of Thor's hammer?
Mjolnir.
See?
But I've been told how to pronounce that.
There you go.
I've known how to pronounce that before I heard it.
We're learning how to pronounce things here as well. So there you go.
Well, I mean, before this, I have no clue. Most people have no clue.
I appreciate that. So anyway, so Haman is representative of the king Agag, and Mordecai is actually a descendant of King Saul. So now we have this play.
Oh, I did not know that Mordecai was a descendant of King Saul. That's interesting.
He's a Benjamite. Yeah, he's a Benjamite. He's a descendant of King Saul. And so here we have replaying that situation. The whole thing at the end of the book, where the king says, you can kill your enemy and you can take all their spoils. And Mordecai says, no, we're not going to take anything. Why does he say that? It's because they're making a tikkun. A tikkun means repair. They're repairing the sin they did way back under King Agag, where they took the treasure when they weren't supposed to. So now, when you're allowed to take the treasure, they don't take it, because they're trying to repair and make right that situation. Excuse me, from the back.
Trying to make right what was once made wrong.
That's right. And so this whole story,
sci-fi time travel. I think Quantum Leap.
You're probably right. I didn't watch much Quantum Leap. My wife did. Her family was big in Quantum Leap. I was just like, I don't know. It wasn't my show. I had other shows I liked. But however, I have watched shows. I haven't watched Quantum Leap since, and I do enjoy it. It's a good show. But anyway, so I'm going to move on, because we've got about 15 minutes left. Your rabbit trail has completely derailed us, and so I don't have a lot of time to deal with the Megillat Esther. But anyway,
we can probably do this a couple weeks in a row if you want.
Okay, we'll see. We'll find out what the audience want. What do they want? All 0 of them. We'll have to ask them what they think. So,
well, anybody listening on any of my channels, make sure to comment in the comment section whether you want more of Esther or whether you want us to go back to Genesis.
There you go. The choice is yours. So let me go back, and I'm going to go ahead and move up to the second chapter. And so all the art you're seeing that with the little scroll thing, this is me. So this chapter 2 is, of course, the time when Mordecai overhears the plot against Ahasuerus. And this becomes important for later, because this is going to be the thing that
enrages Haman. He's like, how could he's thinking the king's going to want to honor him when it's Mordecai he wants to honor.
Right. Well,
Haman is just that full of himself.
Well, he's not. He is and he isn't. Like, Haman got to his position by conniving and plotting and everything else. And if we ever get to it, we're going to see just how much of a plotter he was. And but in this situation, Mordecai is given the opportunity to save the king's life and accrue a great merit, and the king never pays him for it, not immediately. But and Mordecai never brings it up. He never makes a big deal about it. He just feels like he's doing what he's supposed to do in the kingdom. So these two characters are dealt with by the king. They're killed, executed. Let me see, where am I at?
Oh yeah, and we might have a bit more than 15 minutes because we started late. Maybe look at your timer on.
Oh, you're right.
Especially if we want to go over an hour.
You're right, we're only going like 35 minutes. Okay, good. All right. So here we have verse 5. There was a Jewish man in Shushan, the capital, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. So King Saul, the prophet Samuel was a Benjamite. I'm sorry, King Saul was a Benjamite. Excuse me. King Saul was a Benjamite, and he is from that same family line. He had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives that had been carried away with Jeconiah, I'm not sure how you say it in English, of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon.
See, even you're having trouble with these names.
I'm having trouble with the English version of it. That's just giving me the trouble. But I like I said, I can appreciate it. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maiden was of beautiful form and fair to look on. And when her father and mother were dead, Mordecai took her for his own daughter. So Hadassah is one of the names of Esther. Also, another name for Esther is Ayala HaShachar, like the morning star. That's actually the name of my wife. Her name is Ayala HaShachar. And it's a very prominent Hebrew name. It means like the morning star. It's a very pretty name.
Yes.
So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was published, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the capital, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's house to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she received kindness of him, and he speedily gave her the ointments with her portions, and the 7 maidens who were appropriate to be given her out of the king's house, and he advanced her and her maidens to the best place in the house of the women. Now, I guess I should have prefaced all this to let you guys know that Purim was last week. We had Purim starting Wednesday night through Thursday, and my wife told me a nice little drash here that she had read. A drash, like a commentary or something about these 7 maidens, and we hear that she named each of these maidens after one day of the week. And now it would
that would have been different names than what we would know in today, because we do not have the same days of the week as Esther would have had.
Right.
What are the days of the week in Jewish?
Well,
that's what I'll remember.
In Hebrew, it's Yom HaRishon, which is the first day. Yom Sheni, the second day. Yom Shlishi, the third day. That's the. We just count day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 like that. So
it doesn't have no special names.
Yeah, we don't have any pagan names like Moon Day and
Sunday
and all that kind of stuff, right?
And Juno Day.
Right. We have some months that are named that are questionable, but at any rate, but the interesting thing that my wife was telling me was that these women were not named Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That was not how because that would be dehumanizing, and actually they were named according to the essence of the day, and whatever she saw in that person, that's what the essence was they were representative of. There's also stories that eventually these 7 maidens end up converting to Judaism. But these were all very loyal women who served Queen Esther during her time.
Cool.
Now, Esther didn't tell anybody who she was, her lineage, or anything like that, because Mordecai had charged her that she should not tell it. Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what would become of her. Now, when the turn of every maiden was come to go to the king Ahasuerus, after that it had been done to her according to the law of the women, 12 months, so were the days of their anointing accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other ointments of the women. When then the maiden came out to the king, whatsoever she desired was given to her, with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went. Oh, this might be a good thing for me to explain to you. We read the story of the book of Esther during Purim. We read it twice. We read it the evening of Purim, and we read it in the morning services. And one of the traditions that we have is that when we come to Haman's name, we all make as much noise as we can. We boo him. We have these noise makers like that. Boo! And the kids love it. The kids think it's like the best. They love making the noise. And also,
I can believe that.
Right. It's not too hard to believe, right? And also, we dress up in costumes. And part of this is the idea.
So it's like your Halloween.
Only not like pagan and not like scary. It's a positive dress up thing. Yeah. And the idea is that you're.
Well, I guess you dress up those characters, or positive characters from this story. So
they dress up like anything. The kids dress up. They dress up. I mean, they're ghouls sometimes. Now, at this, I don't see them very often dressed up in some of these more negative things. Kids dressed up like Spider-Man and I mean, just other characters. There was
pretty soon we'll have to get them to dress up as your characters and my characters.
That'd be pretty neat, wouldn't it? So, but anyway, so this all has to do with this idea of hiddenness. Esther is hidden, just like God is hidden. Esther is hiding who she is, just like God hides who He is. She becomes, in one sense, sort of a parallel for God, and at this point, she doesn't really seem to have much use to anybody. She's just the lady going through she's maybe going through the beauty pageant, and once she gets chosen, really she has very little actual power, even once she's chosen. So I think sometimes the criticism that people have of God is that what power does God actually have? Do we really ever see His overt action in the world? Well, if you believe in God, then you'd say, yes, of course we do.
But I would say she would have had some power, because I'm sure if she went up to any, I'm sure unless the king contradicted her, if she went up to any servant and said, do this, they would do it. Unless they knew it was directly a violation of what the king would want.
Well, she had powers within her realm. She had power over the women, but most of the major power was held by the king. The king was not going to release any of that power, so she didn't have any ability to affect the kingdom.
Because I know this is going to come later in the story, but even Haman is honored by the fact that he is invited to the dinner that she has with the king. Although he doesn't know it's his demise.
He's honored because it's a private dinner with her and the king and him. And this is something nobody else gets to do. And Haman is always looking for,
the advantage.
The advantage and how awesome I am and what shows my awesomeness. And
reminds me of Sheldon.
Like who?
Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I know Sheldon. So at any rate, part of the lack of power she has is simply because she's a woman, and women aren't really involved in politics.
Yeah, especially in those days.
And so again, this is a lot of this is sort of a metaphor for God and how God operates within the world, and it's and you notice how Esther doesn't just come out and say, "Hey, Kingy Poo, this Haman guy is trying to kill my people. Will you take care of him?" She actually sets things up in a certain way, and she tantalizes him a little bit and sort of guides him around by the nose a little bit and builds him up, and then
just like women do.
Well, and like God does this too. God will sometimes build us up to help us, crash down if we're not a good person. Yeah. So a lot of these are like these metaphors of how God operates the world, and it's very useful. Yeah. If you're going through a series of doubt about, is God operating in your life or not, you can look at the story and I think be encouraged, because it looks like the Jews are on their own. Mordecai is stubbornly, putting on, wearing sackcloth and ashes, and he's sitting in front of the gate, and he's instructing Esther to do what seems like to be crazy things. Go before the king, even though he hasn't summoned you yet. But ultimately, this is a demonstration of his faith in God, that God will provide, salvation for the Jewish people, because God has promised never to wipe us out. But sometimes it's very hard. It's hard to maintain your faith in a time when you just don't see God. You don't see a fiery mountain. You don't see pillars of smoke and fire. You don't see plagues. So how do you know God is taking care of the situation? How do you know He's the one pulling the strings? He's the one who's ultimately leading you in the direction you need to go in life. So the book of Esther is incredibly encouraging, I think, for everybody, especially the more lost you're feeling. I think the better this book will make you feel, because you'll be able to relate it to your own life to a large degree. And we get extremely metaphorical as much as we want to, but there are internal elements to us that want us to fail and destroy ourselves through our own actions. We have our own internal Haman, and Judaism called it the Yitzhak Hara.
Yeah, I was going to say, even, with her getting called upon to be in this beauty pageant, she was just doing her own thing, and then she got called to be taken to be in this beauty pageant, which would lead her to become queen. You never know when, your beauty pageant day is going to come, and then you'll become like queen of the kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, it happens to me all the time. I don't know how many kingdoms I've become the queen over, but no, I understand your point.
Metaphorically, okay, king, you become a prince. Maybe it's not the king having the beauty pageant. Maybe it's the queen having the beauty pageant for the guys, and you become the prince. The prince of the kingdom.
Right. That's
strange. Why can kings make queens, but queens can't make kings?
They can.
No, like the
Queen of England
or whatever, when she married her guy that she was saying, he doesn't become a king.
Oh,
he only becomes a prince.
Oh, okay. Well,
but a guy marries any woman and she becomes a queen.
Well, that's what happened with Xerxes. Xerxes married Vashti, who was a princess of the kingdom. She became the queen, and he became the king.
Okay, I guess that theirs was different then, but a lot of places that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, because
I know it's a rabbit trail, but
it's the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Basically. So anyway,
do we freeze?
No. I was collecting my thoughts to get to try to figure out where I was. Now, one of the interesting things is Queen Esther never really tries to win this beauty contest. It just happens. So Queen Esther was taken to King Xerxes into his house, his royal house in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevet, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace that favors his eyes more than all the maidens, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti.
Well, I guess therein lies some of it. She seemed humble to him. She wasn't trying. She didn't think she was all that in a box of chocolates. So he figured, okay, I'm not going to have a problem like I did with Vashti, with her being queen.
Vashti was definitely very full of herself.
Yeah.
For sure. But she was a princess.
Yeah, princesses usually are full of themselves, right?
They're brought up to
especially if they've been a princess since birth. It's not.
Okay, here we go.
Rabbit trail. Are we told anything in Jewish tradition? Are you told anything about Esther's parents? What happened to them? Why Mordecai was raising her?
I haven't read anything. That doesn't mean something doesn't exist, but I haven't read anything yet.
I know it's something that I've sort of always somewhat thought about, from time to time, what actually happened to her parents.
Yeah, I guess that the parents just aren't that important to the story, to who Esther was, so that happens with a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the Tanakh that we don't know anything about where they come from or who their parents are. Their parents are never mentioned because ultimately they're not important to the story.
Yeah, well, obviously, Mordecai was a brother to one of them, since uncle, right?
Yeah, she was his uncle, right. So here's what I want you to. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those that kept the gate, were angry and sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus.
Bigthan!
And the king became known to Mordecai, and who told it to Esther, the queen, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. And when inquiries were made of the matter, and it was found to be so, they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king. Now I want to say something interesting to you that you may not have ever heard. And I want to say this before we end our time tonight. And that is, that at the end of the story, Haman is hung from a tree. Or he's killed and then his body's hung.
Yeah, but he's also hung up by the gallows that he made for what's his name? Mordecai.
But then they hang up his 10 sons from those gallows. The interesting thing is that there is a direct relationship between the Purim story and you might say also Nazi Germany. Hitler did what Haman wanted to do. He killed a huge number of Jews and others. And so oftentimes we see Hitler as Haman. But did you realize that 10 of his most elite commanders were also hung from a gallows?
No, I did
10
not.
of them. And when one of them was about to be executed, he yelled out Purim Spiel 1948. That person, that Nazi commander himself, had recognized the parallels between what had happened in the story of Purim and what was happening with the end of the Third Reich.
Wow,
it's pretty amazing. It's a really amazing point. If I could think of it, I'll try to send you a link that talks about this a little more in depth. But it blew my mind the first time I heard about this. So ultimately, to understand the kind of person that Haman was, you have to understand Hitler. Hitler's like an Amalekite. The thing that made the Amalekites stand out, the reason they were seen as enemies of God, whereas you'd had others like Egyptians and Syrians and others who did bad things to Israel, but were never really considered the enemies of God, like the Amalekite was. It was because of their entire attitude. Yeah. Their entire attitude was, we would rather die than let the Jews live. If we can kill Jews, then giving up our life is no big thing. And this happened. They were the first in the world to attack the Jews after they came out of Egypt. The entire world had heard of the miracles that happened to the Jewish people in Egypt, and they were afraid. They were afraid to attack the Jewish people. But Amalek said, we don't care. We don't care. Even if we're killed, we're going to attack the Jewish people. No. And there's this self-destructive tendency amongst the Amalekites that they will, between victory and defeat, if they have to be defeated, but they're able to kill Jews, that's what they're going to do. And that's exactly what Hitler did. Hitler, rather than using his trains to help resupply his forces and move troops and things like that, even up to the end, he continued to use them to move Jews to concentration camps. And he really demonstrated this nature of being like an Amalekite. We see this with a lot of even terrorists. There are a lot of terrorists and who go and blow themselves up and do these suicide missions rather than there should be Jews that live in Israel. We'll kill them. So Amalek in one sense doesn't exist as a people, but there is a spirit. In spirit, Amalek still lives. They still exist.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful of Amalek. We have to always be wary and uproot them when we come across them, because otherwise they'd rather destroy the world than allow there to be Jews. So here I'll stop, and we'll see what the people say. If we want us to pick up, we'll pick up chapter 3 next week.
Where are we in this story at this point? We're what, halfway through?
No, we're only in chapter 3. Okay. Somebody kept taking us on rabbit trails. I don't know. I'm going to name names, but somebody kept taking us on rabbit trails and wouldn't let me get on with the story.
You said it's my job, but well, Esther's what, 10 chapters?
Yeah.
Maybe since we're not doing a big thing in this verse by verse, we can obviously come back to it at some point and do verse by verse or close to verse by verse. Maybe we should take the next week or two, just finish off the whole story, go through it all, and get Esther done. I know this is sort of what you did with the other people, and I'm not sure whether it derailed everything or not, but maybe get this done, because I think people will want to see this finished. It'd be neat to see this finished and whatever rabbit trails we go down. I think we can get this done in another 2 weeks. Maybe next week if we don't go down too many rabbit trails.
That's on you. I don't know. But I would just encourage everybody then to go ahead and go to templeinstitute.org/Purim to get their own copy. It's free. You can download the PDF free.
I know I will make sure to try and put a link to the site in my description. Maybe you should try and make sure to put a link in the description of yours after.
Let me go ahead and I'll put it also here. There you go. I'll put it in the chat. That's the link to it. Now, I'll just let you know there's a version in Hebrew and a version in English.
Yes, the top one is English, and you have to click the word like English or whatever. Part of the whole thing is, let's see. I just gotta find it in amongst my stuff here. Yeah, you got to click the word English. None of the other part of it is allows you to download. That's probably what happened to me. I was able to download the Hebrew version, not really realizing. It was the only spot that I found that would allow me to download something, and I just clicked it, and then, crud. It's in Hebrew. I can't read this.
There is an English version, so that's what I've been
right
reading.
Above. My friend is really into the Temple Institute stuff. I think it's the same one. Might be a different one. I have a friend, Doug Curry. He might be interested in that. He does a lot of looking of stuff on the Temple Institute stuff, and he's told me about the recreation of the temple artifacts.
Yep.
They're all done, being made ready for the new temple.
Mm-hmm. You can see they've made a menorah that's on display in the old city. There's a synagogue, and there's like this big sort of like open area. Has steps leading up to it. They've got it on display there under a bunch of heavy glass.
Yeah.
And it's across the street from you see a little barbecue restaurant across from it. And that whole platform with the restaurants, it's near there, and you should definitely check that out when you come to the old city of Jerusalem. If you're in the restaurant area at the top, and it leads to the stairs going down to the Kotel, to the western wall. If you'll right before when you get to the stairs, just look to your right, and then to your right again, and there are steps leading up to the Temple Institute. Go in there and have a tour of the Temple Institute. I've taken that tour several times, and I'll tell you, it really connects with me. It really resonates with me.
Yeah. Well, if I ever get the money to come over to Israel, me and you definitely have to hook up and go do some of that.
Of course, absolutely. I will be your guide when you come over. But I just want to tell you that there is something about going and seeing those treasures and hearing the description and explanation on the guided tour that just really resonates with makes the Bible become much more real. And you really start to connect with, look, for me, knowing the laws, some of the laws on how with the temple and everything like that, I think there's an extra level of reality for me already. But then to actually see the vessels and go, oh, that's what they're talking about. It's incredible. It's an incredible experience.
There was a place, there was a company there's a company here in Canada called Crossroads Christian Communications. Mm-hmm. They had another, I'm pretty sure they had another company come in, and they had a replica of the tabernacle. And I went through that. That was pretty neat. Like
they built these replicas of the tabernacle, and you can buy them in the Temple Institute store. And they range from, being like this big to huge.
No, this was this was, as far as I know, this was life size. What it would have been like. So you walked through it and all that. And you had a guide and all that, say about things, showing that, the different tables and stuff like that for when, the desert and all that, and before the temple. That was an awesome experience in and of itself too. So I could just imagine, seeing all this stuff, in reality.
And there's a lot of scholarship that goes into the creation of all these vessels, and they're ready for use. If the temple opens for business tomorrow, those things are ready for use tomorrow.
Yeah.
So they continue building and making new vessels all the time because there's a lot. But anyway, I would just encourage you guys that if you are on your way to Israel and you want to see those things, you might make contact with me, and who knows, maybe we can meet up. Rick, you definitely have to come, and then we'll go on a trip around and see the sites.
Film it for our YouTube channels.
That's right. There you go.
All right, guys.
That is all the time we've got for tonight, and we're a little over. But next week, I guess we'll continue on with the story of Esther.
See how far we get. Like I said, I think in 2 more weeks, we could have it done. What's that, 3 and 4?
Yeah,
You know?
3, 4, 5. Yeah, we'll see. It depends on Rick.
Yeah, well, 3 and 3 is 6, another 3 is 9, and I'm sure we can squeeze half or each week.
If we don't get through it,
2 weeks or a fourth. Pardon?
I said, if we don't get through, it's Rick's fault.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we'll talk to you guys later. See you next week.